On my birthday, my sister handed me an envelope and said, "Don't expect much. You still haven't earned it." Inside, it read, "Happy birthday to the family, Leech. Pay up this year. You'll grow up." I just texted back, "Good luck earning it now." Then I put my phone on airplane mode, and that was just step one of the plan. I, 24M, stared at the envelope in my hands, my birthday dinner turning to ash in my mouth. My sister had just walked away after dropping that bomb, leaving me sitting at our family table with everyone watching. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, and when I opened it, the words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Happy birthday to the family, Leech. Pay up this year. You'll grow up." The room went quiet. Mom looked confused, Dad cleared his throat awkwardly, and my sister smirked from across the table like she'd just delivered the perfect punchline. She told everyone it was just a joke, that I'd understand, but her eyes said otherwise. This was her declaration of war, and she thought she'd already won. What my sister didn't know was that I'd been planning for this moment for months. See, growing up, I was always the disappointment. The one who chose community college over university, who worked retail instead of climbing corporate ladders, who lived simply instead of chasing status symbols. My sister, 3 years older, never let me forget it. She'd built her entire identity around being the successful one, the one who made it, the one who deserved respect. But success built on lies has a way of crumbling. I excused myself from dinner, went to my room, and pulled out my phone. I typed exactly what I'd planned. "Good luck earning it now." Then I switched to airplane mode and smiled for the first time all evening. My sister would spend the next few hours wondering what that meant. She'd try calling, texting, maybe even coming to my room. But I wouldn't be here. I grabbed my packed bag from under the bed and slipped out the back door. The plan had started 6 months ago when I'd accidentally discovered something that would change everything. I'd been helping my sister move apartments, carrying boxes of her files, when one fell and scattered papers everywhere. Most were normal documents, but buried in the mess were bank statements that didn't make sense. Payments from companies I didn't recognize, amounts that seemed too large for her salary. That's when I started paying attention. My sister worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized firm, making decent money, but nothing spectacular. Yet somehow she afforded a luxury apartment, expensive clothes, and regular vacations. She always claimed she was just good with money, that she'd invested wisely. Our parents believed her because they wanted to believe her. She was their success story. I started following her after work sometimes, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice. 3 times a week, she'd stop at a small office building downtown. She'd go in for exactly 1 hour, then leave looking stressed. When I finally worked up the courage to check the directory, I found something interesting. The building housed several businesses, but only one made sense given my sister's pattern: a high-end escort service operating under the guise of a consulting firm. The pieces fell into place. The mysterious payments, the flexible schedule, the constant stream of money that funded her lifestyle. My perfect sister, the one who never missed a chance to remind me of my failures, was living a double life. But I needed proof. I spent weeks learning her routine, documenting everything. I took photos of her entering and leaving the building, recorded the times, even managed to photograph some of the men she'd meet for these consultations. I created a timeline, cross-referenced it with her social media posts about work events and family dinners. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. The hardest part was staying quiet. Every time she made a snide comment about my job, my apartment, my choices, I wanted to throw it all in her face. But I knew timing was everything. One shot was all I'd get, and it had to count. So I waited for my birthday. I knew she'd do something cruel. She always did. Last year it was a gift card to a job placement service. The year before, a self-help book about financial responsibility. She had a talent for wrapping her cruelty in concern, making our parents think she was just trying to help her struggling little brother. But this year's card crossed a line, calling me a leech in front of our family, demanding I pay up, like I owed her something for existing. It was perfect. She'd just given me all the justification I needed. Now, sitting in my car outside a 24-hour diner across town, I pulled out my laptop and got to work. I'd spent months preparing for this moment, organizing everything into a neat digital package. Photos, timelines, bank records I'd managed to photograph, even screenshots of the escort service's website with their subtle advertising language. I created an anonymous email account and started typing. The first message went to my sister's boss, the CEO of the marketing firm where she officially worked. I kept it professional, concerned rather than accusatory. I mentioned that I'd noticed some inconsistencies in an employee's schedule and thought he should be aware. I attached just enough evidence to raise questions without seeming vindictive. The second message went to our parents. This one was harder to write. I explained that I discovered something troubling about their daughter, that her success wasn't what it seemed. I included more detailed evidence here, knowing they'd need convincing. I told them I was sharing this because I loved our family too much to let the lie continue. The third message was the nuclear option. I sent a comprehensive package to the escort service itself, claiming to be a concerned citizen who'd noticed suspicious activity. I included everything: photos, timelines, evidence of tax evasion, the works. I made it clear that their operation wasn't as discreet as they thought. But I wasn't done. I'd noticed that my sister had been dating someone seriously for the past few months, a guy named Jake who worked in finance and clearly had no idea about her side business. She'd brought him to family dinners, talked about him constantly, even hinted that things were getting serious. Jake got his own special email. I created a different anonymous account for this one, claiming to be someone who'd seen his girlfriend's professional photos on certain websites. I included screenshots of her meetings with various clients, but I kept the language gentle. I told him I thought he deserved to know before things went any further. By dawn, I'd sent everything. 5 different emails to 5 different recipients, each one carefully crafted to cause maximum impact while keeping my involvement invisible. Then I drove to a camping site 3 hours away and settled in to wait. Update 1. I stayed off the grid for 3 days, camping in the mountains with no cell service. When I finally came back to civilization and turned my phone on, I had 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. My sister's messages started confused, then angry, then desperate. She wanted to know where I was, what I meant by my text, why I wasn't answering her calls. By the second day, the tone changed completely. She was begging me to call her back, saying she needed to talk to me urgently. My parents' messages were harder to read. Mom sounded hurt and confused, asking if what they'd heard was true. Dad was more direct, demanding I come home immediately so we could discuss what he called this situation. But it was the message from my sister's boss that told me everything I needed to know. He'd called to ask if I had any additional information about the employee in question and mentioned that they'd already begun an internal investigation. I drove home that evening. The house felt different when I walked in. Quieter. My parents were waiting in the living room, looking like they'd aged years in just 3 days. Mom had been crying. Dad looked exhausted. They told me to sit down. They'd received the email, they said. They'd also gotten calls from my sister's former boss. She'd been fired immediately, and from someone claiming to be with the police, though that turned out to be Jake's friend who worked in law enforcement and had run some of the information I provided. My sister was upstairs, they said. She'd been there since yesterday morning when everything started falling apart. She knew I was behind it all, though she couldn't prove it. She'd lost her job, her boyfriend, and potentially faced criminal charges for tax evasion. I told them I was sorry they had to find out this way, but that I wasn't sorry for exposing the truth. I explained about the birthday card, about years of being made to feel worthless while she lived a life funded by money she'd never declared to the IRS. Dad asked if I'd planned this revenge from the beginning. I told him honestly that I'd planned to expose her eventually, but that her cruelty on my birthday had simply determined the timing. That's when my sister came downstairs. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes red from crying, and she moved like someone who'd been broken from the inside out. She asked why I'd done this to her, why I destroyed her life over a stupid card. I reminded her what the card had said, how she'd called me a leech in front of our family, how she'd demanded I pay up like I owed her something for existing. I told her that her life had been built on lies, and that I'd simply removed the foundation she'd been standing on. She broke down then, admitting everything. The escort work, the tax evasion, the way she'd used our parents' pride in her success to maintain her image while secretly resenting having to keep up the charade. She said she'd started the work to pay for her lifestyle, but had gotten trapped by the money and the expectations. But even through her tears, she couldn't apologize for the years of making me feel worthless. She was sorry she'd gotten caught, sorry her life was ruined, but not sorry for the way she'd treated me. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Update 2. 3 weeks later, the full consequences of my sister's double life came crashing down. The escort service, panicked by my anonymous tip, had tried to destroy evidence, but their clumsy attempts only drew more attention from authorities who'd been watching them for months. My sister, as one of their highest-earning contractors, became a key figure in the investigation. She was facing charges for tax evasion, participating in an illegal enterprise, and several other financial crimes. Her lawyer told our parents she'd likely face prison time unless she cooperated with prosecutors, which would mean testifying against other people involved in the operation. Jake had gone public with their relationship's end, telling mutual friends exactly why he'd broken up with her. The story spread quickly through their social circles, destroying what remained of her reputation in the community where she'd built her identity. Our parents were struggling with the reality of who their daughter really was. Mom kept asking where they'd gone wrong, why she'd felt the need to lie to them about everything. Dad was angry, feeling manipulated and embarrassed that he'd bragged about his successful daughter to his friends and colleagues. But the most unexpected development came when my sister's former boss called me directly. He'd done his own investigation after receiving my anonymous email and discovered that my sister had been using company resources for her other business. She'd been scheduling meetings with clients during work hours, using company phones and email accounts, even listing her official job as a cover for her real income source. He wanted to thank me for bringing this to his attention, he said, because it could have destroyed his company's reputation if it had come out differently. Then he offered me a job. It wasn't anything glamorous, a position in their communications department, handling some of the work my sister had been neglecting while managing her double life. But it was a real job with real benefits, and it paid almost twice what I'd been making in retail. I accepted immediately. My first day at the new job, I walked past my sister's old office, now being cleaned out by security. Her personal items were packed in boxes, waiting for someone to pick them up. I could see awards on her desk, photos with coworkers, the carefully constructed facade of a successful professional life. None of it had been real. That evening, I came home to find my sister waiting for me. She'd been crying again, but there was something different in her demeanor. Harder, more desperate. She told me she knew I'd taken her job, that I'd stolen her life and given it to myself. She accused me of planning this entire thing just to take her place, to finally be the successful sibling our parents were proud of. I told her she was wrong. I hadn't planned to benefit from her downfall. That had been an unexpected bonus. I'd simply wanted the truth to come out, wanted our family to see who she really was instead of the lie she'd been performing. But her accusation made me think. Maybe part of me had wanted to see her fall so I could rise. Maybe the revenge had been sweeter because it hadn't just destroyed her fake success. It had given me real success in return. She begged me to tell the authorities that I'd made everything up, that the evidence was fabricated. She promised she'd never insult me again, that she'd support me, that she'd be the sister I'd always wanted if I would just help her escape the consequences of her choices. I told her it was too late for that. The evidence was real, the investigation was ongoing, and her fate was in the hands of prosecutors now. Nothing I said would change what she'd done or the price she'd have to pay for it. She left that night, packed her remaining belongings, and moved in with a friend across town. Our parents were relieved, I think. Having her constant presence in the house, crying and raging and begging for help they couldn't give, had been wearing them down. Update 3. 6 months after my birthday, I was settling into my new life. The job was challenging but rewarding, and I'd been promoted twice already. My supervisor told me I had a natural talent for communications, that I understood how to reach people in ways that felt genuine rather than manipulative. My parents and I had grown closer through the whole ordeal. They'd started seeing me as an adult rather than their disappointing younger child, and they'd begun asking for my advice on family matters. It felt good to finally have their respect, even if it had come at such a cost. My sister had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against the escort service in exchange for reduced charges. She'd serve 6 months in minimum security prison and pay substantial fines, but she'd avoid the longer sentence she could have faced. Our parents visited her once a week, but I never went. I wasn't cruel enough to gloat, but I wasn't ready to pretend we could just move past everything either. The day before she was scheduled to begin her sentence, she called me. Her voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. She said she'd had months to think about everything, about the person she'd become and the choices she'd made. She finally apologized. Not for getting caught, not for losing her fake life, but for the years of making me feel worthless. She admitted that she'd known exactly what she was doing, that she'd enjoyed having someone to look down on because it made her feel better about herself. She said she'd been jealous of my contentment, my ability to be happy with simple things, because she'd never been able to find that kind of peace. I listened, but didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to accept her apology, to tell her we could start over when she got out. But a larger part of me remembered every birthday, every family dinner, every casual cruelty disguised as sisterly concern. I told her I appreciated her apology, but that I wasn't ready to forgive her yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Too much damage had been done, and words couldn't undo years of emotional manipulation. She said she understood, that she'd expected as much. Then she asked if I was happy with how everything had turned out, if destroying her life had been worth it. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. I told her that I hadn't destroyed her life. I'd simply revealed what her life really was. The destruction had come from her own choices, her own lies, her own need to build herself up by tearing others down. Was I happy? Yes, in ways I'd never expected to be. I had a job I enjoyed, parents who respected me, and a sense of self-worth that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. I'd learned that I was capable of patience, planning, and decisive action when it mattered. But I also told her that I wasn't celebrating her downfall. I took no joy in seeing her headed to prison, in watching our parents struggle with disappointment and shame. I'd wanted justice, not suffering, though I understood now that sometimes they were the same thing. She was quiet for a long time after that. Finally, she said she hoped that someday she could build a real life, one based on truth instead of lies. She said maybe when she got out, she'd try to become the person she'd pretended to be instead of the person she actually was. I wished her luck with that, and meant it. Then I hung up the phone and went back to my real life, the one I'd built from honest work and genuine relationships. The next morning, my parents drove her to begin her sentence. I stayed home and went to work, where I spent the day helping a small business owner craft a marketing message about integrity and authentic values. Sometimes life has a sense of irony that's almost too perfect to believe. A year later, I still think about that birthday envelope sometimes. Those words, family leech and pay up, had been intended to wound, to reinforce a hierarchy where I would always be less than. Instead, they'd become the catalyst for the most important decision I'd ever made. My sister had been right about one thing. It was time for me to grow up. But growing up meant refusing to accept undeserved punishment, standing up for myself, and holding people accountable for their choices. It meant recognizing that family loyalty doesn't require accepting cruelty, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior. I kept that card, actually. It sits in my desk drawer at work, a reminder of how far I've come and how much power we give other people to define our worth. These days, when I look at it, I don't feel hurt or angry. I feel grateful. After all, it was the best birthday gift my sister ever gave me. The motivation to finally fight back and discover who I really was beneath all her expectations of who I should be.